How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to this week's episode of Pain and Suffering. My name is Kingfisher, and if there's one thing that gets my chub enthused, it's thinking about the Isle in 2025. And by chub, I am of course referring to Squaliocephalus, the fish. We're 10 seconds into the episode and there's already a fish joke, so yeah, it's gonna be a good day. But anyway, on this episode of Fish Hooks, I'd like to cover more or less what my personal expectations will be for the Isle as a whole in the year 2025. And the reason I want to do that is because we're on the precipice of some pretty damn huge changes. One of which being the implementation of two of the most powerful creatures on the Isle, establishing a proper power ceiling for the entire roster. And not just that, but as we'll go over today, the introduction of a proper gameplay loop in the form of the long-awaited Elder system. There's a lot to talk about. I'm going to go more in-depth in some things than others, obviously, but the whole thing is basically just going to be me being like really hopeful for what we'll get this year. I'll try to be as realistic as I can, but you know, I get excited talking about this stuff, so we'll see. And by the way, that's going to be a word that you're going to hear a lot today is excited, for I am not good with synonyms. But regardless, first off, I'm going to start off simple. The dinosaurs, right? What dinosaurs are we going to get in 2025? So there are 4 creatures that I believe we will for sure receive this year. As for when, I have no idea, but 90% chance that we get them. 95% chance. And those 4 are Rex, Trike, Allosaurus, and Ostroraptor. I already said that Rex and Trike will be acting as more or less like the power caps of the game, like kind of when you start watching a new show or a new anime, they introduce you to like the strongest hero, the strongest villain to kind of establish the limits of the abilities of the characters in the world. Effectively, that is what Rex and Trike will do, along with a bunch of the other apexes that they'll be introducing. And when I say apexes, I'm not fully referring to sauropods, as I believe that they're in a different class entirely. So other animals like Ankylosaurus, Spinosaurus, Shantungosaurus, when those are introduced, they will also act as like absolute peak in terms of how powerful an animal can get in this game. But for now, the introduction of Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops will sort of create that baseline that I think is very important. And I mean, it's Tyrannosaurus and it's Triceratops. They are 2 of the most iconic dinosaurs that have ever existed. And assuming that what Kissin has said in her responses to some questions are true, we're about to experience Rex and Trike in a way that we never have in any of these games. If my memory serves me correctly, Rex will have upwards of 600 animations. And based on some of those animations that we've seen so far, he will be able to do a lot. They've made it clear several times that they are kind of setting the industry standard with the way that they're approaching their development of Rex and Triceratops. So I'm very excited to see what that standard is and if it even lives up to the hype, because obviously I think we're all going to be super disappointed if they hype up and they glaze this animal that much only for it to like be a press E to win situation upon release. Rex and Trek have legitimately been actively worked on for I think upwards of, I would say, 2 years at this point, which is obviously an insane amount of time and dedication to put into 2 playables, but I understand why. They are the 2 titular playables of a dinosaur game. Logically, you would want to pool your resources into making these 2 creatures the best that they could possibly be and set the standard while you're at it. But if there's one animal that I'm even more excited for, like this shit gets me feeling like Drake probably does when he passes by his school zone, it's Ostroraptor. Genuinely, I have been waiting for Ostroraptor for so long. Ostroraptor, in terms of the playstyle that we, the community, think that it's going to have, based on what Kissin herself has said, and as well as the concept art and just general look and vibe that the character design gives off, is going to be the perfect playable to suit my playstyle. Nimble and agile, but still kind of squishy for something in its weight range. The fact that it's literally a semi-aquatic fisher, in case you couldn't tell by my name, makes me absolutely elated. And apparently, over the break, Kissin mentioned that there's like a dedicated fishing system for it, which after I saw it, I didn't record it, so you just have to believe me. I probably did 3 backflips consecutively. I'm a fisherman in real life, as you know, could probably, like, the name isn't just for show, okay? I chose this for a reason. Knowing that Ostro is gonna get it, like, a dedicated fishing system is like the best news that I could have possibly heard in relation to it. It's a feeling akin to what I'm sure basic white girls experience when Taylor Swift drops yet another mid-ass album. During the break, she also mentioned that a lot of these playables are going to be quote-unquote set up, which I don't remember if she explained or not. I'll put it up on screen if she did more or less what that means. But if I were to take a guess, it would basically just be to kind of actually start programming and inputting all their stuff and, like, you know, matching the animations with the proper inputs and what have you, all that fancy game developer stuff. So I honestly wouldn't be surprised, and obviously I'm very hopeful to be seeing Ostro in some form of horde test by, like, I want to say June or July, if I'm being realistic. If I'm being hopeful, a little earlier, but, you know, where has that gotten us in the past? Also, Allosaurus is another playable that I'm super hyped about because it's going to properly fill in a spot that I think is very detrimental to the ecosystem right now, because the current state of the Isle's ecology is, as the young people say, in fucking shambles. You have two mid-tier herbivores in the form of Diablo and Maya basically dominating the entire map because of how accessible they are, but even then, the most powerful carnivore is, ironically enough, Dilophosaurus, who isn't even a mid-tier, and the quote-unquote mid-tier carnivores that we do have are a body bully and a small-tier hunter that, as far as I know, gets pretty much destroyed in any 1v1 within its weight range. And the only other larger carnivore that we have is tied to the water for pretty much its entire life. So having a proper mid-tier carnivore is going to be huge in terms of balancing the ecosystem. Kentrosaurus development is also apparently in full swing, no pun intended, which is kind of crazy because it hasn't really been that long since they revealed some skins for it and some like new poses using a new rigging system that Brian has been workshopping that apparently, according to him in one of the devlogs from before, kind of severely simplified some of the work that he had to do in terms of like rigging and stuff like that. I don't know about the specifics, but from his mouth, what would have taken weeks to do before was done in like a couple hours. So obviously that's like a huge improvement. And seeing as how a lot of these animators that Kissin has been taking under her wing and training in the aesthetics of the Isle for a super long time now are finally starting to really blossom and starting to kind of pump out these animations much faster. Obviously, super exciting news to hear. I don't know if Kentro is going to come in 2025. I wouldn't bet on it personally, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it did. I'm more excited about seeing the work that they're going to begin on Baryonyx because both Kissin and Brian have said that they are going to give it the true like king treatment this time around, as apparently there was a bunch of stuff that they wanted to do with it in Legacy that they just couldn't for whatever reason. So I don't believe we'll get Barry in 2025. I hope that we do. Obviously, like once Barry and Ostro come out, you're not going to see me playing fucking anything else until like Shantungosaurus comes out, maybe. But moving on to Elders, Kissin herself has said that it's going to be something that they're going to start working on very, very soon if they haven't already. They already have a lot of the Elder models done. Most of them are pretty good. Some of them are ass, whatever. I'm not going to get into that now. I'm very interested in seeing how they're going to tackle this mechanic because it's obviously super important in rounding out the gameplay loop and making it feel like a proper survival game and not the deathmatch that some actual living, breathing troglodytes in this community think that the game is. I know Dondi recently spoke about the system in one of his streams about how there's going to be like a frail elder or like a prime elder and just different stages of elder, which I find very intriguing, but we don't have enough information to go off of right now, so we'll just have to wait and see. It's about a solid like 50-50 that we actually receive elders in 2025, assuming all goes smoothly. But yeah, just like thinking about it is super, super exhilarating. The new UI, it looks pretty cool. I want to see more of it. I want to see it implemented. That's all I wanted to say about that. So now nesting grounds on Gateway will more than likely start popping up as time goes on. I don't think they're just going to drop them all at once. It's going to be more like a sporadic kind of thing where like, oh, here's a patch. We recently remodeled a part of like East Plains or something. I don't know. They mentioned the reintroduction of these areas a couple dev blogs ago, and when like a specific one that was actually like packed full of information, including nesting grounds and elders. And part of why I'm excited for it, apart from like, you know, actually encouraging nesting, is that it makes for some really, really interesting looking areas, assuming that they're still going to base themselves off of the concept art that Fred has mocked up for them. These sketches and these pieces are legitimately peak, and I want to see more of them. Like, I want to see these generalized nesting grounds where like Dibbles and Mayas or whatever can like all converge, but I also want to see the kind of species specific nesting grounds that Dondi briefly mentioned in that dev blog. I want to see like what it's going to look like for Herrerasaurus, maybe. Like perhaps they'll have the ability to nest on like a secluded cliff or something that will kind of have availability to certain resources that will make nesting not as much of a pain for those Herrera parents. Same goes for like Bapiausaurus, you know, maybe secluded ponds in the swamp or something that dinos can't access, or like Ostroraptors will have a more difficult time getting to. Things like that will kind of encourage interspecies interaction, you know? It's also a huge possibility that this year we will see and hear a lot more about burrowing and how that's going to function. It's clear that it's not like at the top of their priority list right now, which, you know, I understand. Obviously the playables should take priority, and so should like the core mechanics, but it's still good to know that it's something that's being worked on, and I really hope that it comes soon, because once it does, it'll open up the floodgates for other burrowing animals like Protoceratops and Homalocephaly. I also wanted to briefly mention a comment that Dondi made like a couple months ago at this point, and that was how Spiro Spiro quote-unquote looks pretty cool right now. It's pretty clear that this comment suggests that they've been making some considerable changes to Spiro behind the scenes. Obviously, they haven't shown anything yet, but judging by the way that Dondi was talking about it, I mean, it could be cool. Who knows? I didn't like Spiro at all in the way that it was prior to Gateway dropping, but I actually did really like it in its earlier iterations. Hopefully, it'll be like kind of like a callback to that, if assuming that they've kept the whole tropical Jurassic Park aesthetic that they seem to love with this game. But there's also a possibility that they may have leaned in a more temperate direction, which, you know, opens up the possibility for redwoods. Maybe? Possibly. It kind of like harkening back to the days of Legacy where they had actual like coniferous forests and stuff. I don't know. That's pretty exciting if you ask me. Like thinking about that possibility got me feeling some type of way. I'ma just say that. But I think that's about it in terms of like things that I truly believe will happen in 2025. TLDR, Rex, Trike, Ostro, Aloe, possibly Elders, and some changes with nesting grounds, and I pray for the new UI. From the glimpse that we saw, looks really good. Looks really clean and sleek. It fits the current state of the game much more. I want to see it. I want it in my paws. Shit got me feeling like Bilbo Baggins. It's also very possible that we might see some adjustments to Pteranodon's kit, as well as Deinosuchus. And by the way, I don't think Pteranodon being more terrestrial is a bad thing. I understand that with a flying animal, you're gonna have a lot of issues in terms of like performance. Logically, you would kind of want to curb that behavior because at this point, they can't remove Pteranodon. Like that's just not a thing that they can do. So as much as I personally would love a proper seabird, like beach-dwelling Pteranodon that dives underwater for fish and stuff, I understand that it would take a huge toll on performance and etc, etc. I don't think it being more terrestrial is a bad thing because something that I personally like kind of didn't think about at first, which, you know, the devs are kind of right about in this case, is that being more terrestrial doesn't mean you're less capable in the air. Like they're still going to be working on wind currents. They're still going to be using those kind of pockets of heat that Pteranodons will be able to lift themselves up more without using stamina. I think the initial confusion may have stemmed from like, oh, because it's more terrestrial, then it's going to be less fit in the air, which is just not true. Now, as for whether or not these terrestrial changes will be good and or interesting is a completely separate story. The chances of Pteranodon being butchered even more than it already has been is like 10 billion% possible, so all we can possibly do is wait and see. But yeah, that's probably something else that I believe we'll be getting later this year. Overall, if even half of the stuff that I mentioned in this video comes true, I do think that it will be one of, if not the best years for the Isle as a game. With the introduction of some pretty necessary playables, the core gameplay loop, and some more areas for animals to be able to properly interact with each other, which is the whole point of the game, it'll elevate it to a state that it has never been in before, and I am super, super excited to see that. It is truly, absolutely exhilarating. But yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to say about that. See ya.